NCRT 6th Class History Introduction. What, Where, How and When. Rahila sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly her eyes fell on a small headline. 100 years ago. How she wondered, could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? Finding out what happened yesterday, you could listen to the radio, watch television, radio, newspaper. Last year, ask somebody who remember. But what about long, long ago? Let us see how it can be done. What can be now about the past? There are several things we can find out: what people ate, the kind of clothes they were, the house in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of hunter, herder, farmer, rulers, merchant, priest, craft person, artist, musicians, and scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the place they saw, the song they sang. Where did people live? Find a river Narmada on map. People have lived along the bank of this river for several 100,000 years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They know about the vast wealth of planet in their surroundings, forest, and collect root, fruits, and other forest produce for their food. They also hunted animals. Now find the Suleiman and Kedar hills to the northwest, some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley about 800 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and lived in villages. Locate the Garo hills to the northeast and Vindhyachal in central India. These were some of the other areas where agriculture developed. The place where rice was first grown are to the north of Vindhyachal. Trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Tributaries are smaller rivers that follows into a larger about 1407 years ago. Some of the earliest cities flourished on the bank of these rivers. Later, about 25 years ago, cities developed on the bank of Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Locate the Ganga and its tributaries called the Sun. In ancient times, in areas along these rivers to the south of Ganga was known as Magad, now lying in the state of Bihar. Its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in the other parts of country as well. Throughout, people travel from one part of the subcontinent to another. The hills and high mountains, including the Himalayas, desert, river, and sea, made a journey dangerous at times, but never impossible. So, man and woman moved in search of livelihood, as also to escape from natural disaster like flood or drought. Sometimes men and marched in armies, conquering other land. Beside merchant and travel with caravans or ships, carrying valuable goods from place to place. And religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instructions and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by a spirit of adventure, wanted to discover new exciting places. All this led to the sharing of ideas between people. Why do people travel nowadays? Look at the map once more. Hills, mountains, and sea from natural frontier of subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountains and cross the sea People from across the frontier also came into the subcontinent, settled here. This movement of people enrich our culture traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stone, composing music, and even cooking a food over several hundred of years. Name of the land, two of the words we often use for our country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from the Indus called Sindhu and Sanskrit. Find Iran, Greece in your atlas. The Iranians and the Greeks who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus, called it is the Indus or the Indus, and land to the east. The river was called India. The name of Bharat was used for a group of people who lived in the northwest, who are the mentioned in the Rig Veda. The earliest composition, the Sanskrit date about 35 years ago. Later it was used for the country. Finding out about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read books that were written long ago. These are called the manuscript because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning word. These were usually written on palm of leaf on the especially prepared bark of tree, known as the bridge, which is grows in Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away from insects. Some were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious belief and practice, the lives of king, medicine and science. Besides, they were speaks, poem, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit. Other one in Prakrit language, used of ordinary people and Tamil. We can also study inscription. These are writing and relatives, hard surface such as a stone or metals. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them. There are other kind of inscription as well, where men and women, including kings and queens, recorded what they did. For example, king often kept records of victories in a battle. Can you think of the advantage of writing on a hard surface and what could have been the difficulties? There were many other things that were made and used in the past. These who study this subject are called the archaeologists. They study the remains of buildings made of stone and bricks, painting, sculpture. They also explore, dig model the surface of the earth. To finding tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stone, others of bones and big clay or metal. Objects that are made of hard, impressible substance usually survive for a long time. Archaeologists also look for the bones of animals, birds and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive for more. Rarely, if seed of grain or piece of wood have you been front, they survive in charm form. Do you think cloth is foundly frequently by archaeologists? Historian, that is scholar who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscript, inscription, and archaeologist. Once sources are found, learning about the past become an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clue to find out about our past. One past or many. Did you notice the title of this book, Our Past? We have used the word past in plural to draw attention to the fact that is the past was different for different group of people. For example, the lives of herder or farmer were different from those of king and queen. The lives of merchant were different from those of craft person, and so on. Also, it's true even today people follow different practice and custom in different part of the country. For example, today most living in Andaman Island get their own food by fishing, hunting and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in cities depend on others for supplies of food. Difference such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about kings and a battle they fought because they kept record of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as a hunter, fishing, folk, gatherer, farmers, herder did not keep record of what they did. While archaeologists help us to find out about their lives, there is much that remains unknown. What do you date means? If somebody asks you the date, you will be probably mention the day, month and year 2000 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. All date before the birth of Christ are counted backward and usually have the letter BC before Christ added on. In this book, we will refer to the date going back from the present using 2000 as our starting point. Later with this, BC stand before Christ. You will be sometimes an AD before date. This stands for two Latin words Anno Domus, meaning in the years of Lord Christo 2012, and can also be written as AD 2012. Sometimes C is used to instant AD and BC instant BC. The letter C stands for the common era, BC for the before common era. We use these terms because the Christianity era is now used in most countries of the world. In India, we began using this form dating from the about 200 years ago, and sometimes the later BP means before present are used. Find two date mentioned on page 3. Which set of letter would you use for them? You have to interview an archaeologist. Prepare a list of 5 questions that you would like to ask or him. Match the following: Narmada Valley, Magad, Garo Hills, Indus and its tributaries, Ganga Valley. List 1 major difference between Manusmriti and inscriptions. The first big kingdom, hunting and gathering cities about 25 years ago. Early agriculture, the first cities. Thank you so much for videos.